I'm Patrick Daly and I'm one of the team at the Rural Doctors Association of Australia. Welcome to our latest podcast series featuring RDAA's award recipients for 2025. In today's podcast, I'm chatting with Dr. Jean Littlewood, RDAA's Rural Doctor in Training of the Year. Jean's an absolute dynamo of rural medicine, and the phrase she coined, "guilt is not a rural recruitment strategy," has taken on a life of its own. Now in her final year of RG training with ACRRRM, she's already contributed to the work of numerous organisations, including serving for 3 years on the Rural Doctors Association of New South Wales Management Committee. One of her most impactful contributions while on that committee was the part she played in gaining a fairer deal for New South Wales rurally based JMOs when they undertake rotations to metropolitan hospitals. More about that later. Jean's currently working and training in Coonabarabran, and if she's not busy enough, she still finds time to take to the field for a game or two of country rugby union, a sport she's played at a New South Wales representative level. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we meet on across Australia as we listen to this podcast. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander listeners who may be joining us. Jean, congratulations on receiving our RDAA Rural Doctor in Training of the Year Award for 2025.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about your childhood. Were you raised in a rural community?
So I grew up in North West New South Wales between Tamworth and Gunnedah. I did grow up on a little farm. My parents weren't initially farmers, but was pretty lucky to grow up there in between quite a few little spots. I went to the local school, about 30 kids, and then went to high school in Tamworth. So yes, definitely well and truly from a rural community.
And your parents were teachers. Was there any time at which you were destined to become a teacher yourself, do you think?
Well, interestingly, my parents said they could do anything but be a teacher, which wasn't because teaching was a bad profession, but that they'd done it for 30 or so years and they felt that maybe I should do something different. But I think they were probably also part of the, inspiration in terms of hearing about rural communities. They worked all around rural New South Wales and always told a lot of stories of all these towns. And I think that was something that really highlighted to me how interesting little communities can be. So no, I mean, I don't think I was ever going to be a teacher, although I do look at the holidays now and think maybe it would have been a better idea, but it's going all right so far.
I think you do a lot of extra schoolwork as a teacher over the holidays anyway, is what I've been told.
True.
So you might have lucked out there anyway, actually.
Yeah.
So tell me about your journey into becoming a doctor. Was there ever going to be another career choice, or was it pretty much a decision that you made as soon as you experienced it?
So I always knew I wanted to do something in health. I didn't think I was bright enough to get into medicine, but my parents said, "Oh, why don't you go and do some work experience with the local GP?" So I did, and he was a typical rural generalist, been in the community for about 30 years, and went and saw patients at the hospital and had his Labrador run through the practice at times and sat on a gym ball as a chair. And I think some of the patients that he saw and the way he interacted with patients was something I really liked. And I think that was probably where the inspiration initially came from. And I think the biggest thing was talking to some of his patients and their wonderful stories. I loved hearing about all the stories and thought, yeah, this sounds good. I can't wait to help people and talk to people. I realise now that medicine is actually a lot harder than just talking to people. But that's okay. I get to do that now, so it's good.
So it's a good part of it anyway. Once you decided when you were in that doctor's practice that you thought medicine was for you, was it a challenge to work hard enough, study hard enough to get through high school and end up at university studying medicine?
Yeah, so I think I didn't get in. I wanted to go straight to university. I didn't get in the first year. Turns out I wasn't very good at the UMAT. Probably still couldn't do it these days. But so I went and did medical science. My parents thought it would be a better idea to go off to uni and enjoy it. and try again the following year. So I did that and had the great privilege of getting into the same uni I was at, which is the Uni of New South Wales, and sort of stay with a lot of my friends from all over New South Wales who were in college with me there. And yeah, so only a minor setback compared to some people, but I think the privilege wasn't lost on me when I got in there, and it meant that I could come back to the country and do some of the things that I had seen being done. So yeah.
How did that work for you in terms of studying at uni? You're studying in Sydney at the Uni of New South Wales, as you said, but then you moved to, I think, Dubbo and the Rural Clinical School there. Is that right?
I went to Port Macquarie up on the
Port Mac.
coast. Yeah, so to Port Mac. And so I did the first 3 years in Sydney, or I did 3 years in total in Sydney. And, sorry, 4 years in Sydney. I'm forgetting already. And then 3 years in Port Macquarie. Which was quite interesting to me, actually, I guess, because I was so interested in people's lives and, you know, where they come from and their stories. And I always felt that the coast was similar to being an inland kid. And I swiftly discovered that it's not quite the same as being an inland kid. And I quite liked my time in Port Macquarie, but I guess as soon as I moved back over the range in New South Wales, I was a lot happier and realised where I belonged.
Interesting. Too many sharks in Port Macquarie for you, or
way too many sharks, too much sand, too much beach.
You can keep a much cleaner laundry over the other side of the mountains. Yeah.
And I do often say to patients when I'm going to give them a needle, just think of the beach. And a lot of them go, "Oh, I don't really like the beach. I don't like sand." And I think, yeah, I am where I belong.
You're with your tribe.
Where no one else likes sand.
Oh, I know that feeling. So you've chosen rural generalism as your medical career path. At what stage did that kick in for you as being the career you wanted it? I suspect it was probably in that first visit to the practice with the doctor and the Labrador, to be honest. But what were the deciding factors, and how easy has that journey been to implement after you made that decision?
Well, as I said, I liked hearing people's stories, and medicine is a lot harder than that. So I wouldn't say it was definitely an easy thing. I don't think it's easy for anyone, although some people make it look fairly easy. But I think throughout my medical training, going to the hospital and again meeting other specialties and seeing, you know, what they did and how they operated, I think it just reaffirmed to me that I wanted to do general practice and wanted to really just be looking after patients in a holistic way, I guess, not just the pathology. And I say this to students now, I like people, not pathology. And that's not to say that other non-GP specialists don't like people. It's more just that a lot of it is more pathology based, and that's why they chose that career, if that makes sense. So I like people over pathology, and I think that became a recurrent theme throughout my medical schooling, and then as a JMO too in the hospital in Dubbo.
And in terms of the current crop of medical students, are you really sensing that RG is a career that a lot of junior doctors are, first of all, recognising, but also aspiring to? Has there been a real growth in that area of medicine over the past 5 years, say?
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those things that is on people's radar. You know, life happens, I think, to a lot of people, and sometimes they change their mind, which is fine. And I think that, unfortunately, in New South Wales in particular, a lot of our training or junior medical officer days are very geared towards the hospitalist side of things. And I think that's where we do lose a lot of people, even though we're doing a lot of work into trying to change that. You just don't get the exposure. And I think, interestingly, when I started in general practice, something I've always wanted to do and always have spoken to GPs and done placements and things, it wasn't what I expected when I got here either. So it was so much more than I expected. So I think that even as somebody who's always wanted to do it, I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding there. And I think we just have to keep working one person at a time to change that. So.
How was it different to what you expected? Because you came from a rural area, so you would have had a better idea than some metro students as to what rural GP entailed. But it was even a surprise to you as to what it involved?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, everyone always says it's the breadth of knowledge in general practice that you need to know. And I think that definitely still rang true. But I think that, as a junior medical officer in the hospital, you watch the BPTs, for example, the medical registrars who are starting this medication and that medication and know this about all these medical things. And I realized in my registrar training as a GP, I was doing exactly the same thing, just over a few weeks instead of over a few days. And I think, even though that seems so silly, that was something that I hadn't really picked up. And being in a rural area, you just do most of it yourself and not really have the ability to ask somebody or get somebody in quickly to do something. So you do a lot more learning on the fly about how you're going to manage people chronically without being able to ask the boss or the certain specialty. So yeah, it definitely it's improved me as a person and also as a clinician, I think.
So where's your GP training taken you so far? And apart from what you've just mentioned, were there other key takeaways you've experienced along the way?
So I am based in Western New South Wales, so mostly through there. And I think I have reflected on this a lot. There's a lot of people who go locuming or they might go to different states or things like that. And I think, oh, maybe I should, be a bit better and a bit more adventurous. And then I realized that actually just being in some of these communities, any kind of community, is helpful and is making a difference. So I don't have to go and do the remote locums or train in extreme environments in order to be doing good things. And I think that was something that I battled with for a long time. Rural generalism is something that's marketed as a very exciting and challenging, a rewarding career, which it is, and it can be even in the little communities that I've been in, and it doesn't have to necessarily happen in faraway places. And I think accepting that's been really important. So I have been to Wellington in Western New South Wales. So my supervisor there is a stalwart of rural medicine. He's been doing it for 50 odd years, Dr. Ian Spencer. So you can't really train under a better boss than that. And he taught me so much about medicine, but also a lot about, being a rural doctor and being a good person. So that's definitely been a highlight. And I was there for 2 years, and now I'm in Coonabarabran with another stalwart and up and coming stalwart in rural medicine, Dr. Iannucci. So
and winemaker, I think.
And winemaker, very beneficial.
That's right.
And very good at making pasta, I will add.
Oh, right. Wow.
Yeah,
it's impressive. Yeah.
So it has been good to have a different approach to Dr. Spencer and learn a bit more stuff about, being a VMO in the hospital and being a little bit further away from a regional centre and how to manage all these. And being in a small community as somebody who's, loves sport and playing alongside the people that you see in the clinic and managing those. And there's some wonderful colleagues I have here too in Coonabarabran. Somebody I went through uni with, Dr. Blythe, and then another inspiration of mine, Dr. Yabsley. So I've got a lot of community and colleague support here as well.
Have you found that situation of playing sport alongside some of your patients? Has that been something that you're taught to manage, or do you learn how to do that yourself, particularly and we'll get to it a bit later, but you play rugby union. I'd imagine you might end up tackling one of your patients that you then need to treat for a knee injury maybe on the Monday.
Yep, it's definitely happened. So it's definitely been a learning experience, I must say. I think, again, this is where my colleagues, Dr. Yabsley in particular, has really been so helpful to me and she's been here for 5 or 6 years now and has been managing these kinds of things. And same with Dr. Spencer and Dr. Iannucci as well. But it is interesting. And I think the only teaching we get on it is, you shouldn't be friends with your patients, which is about the extent of it, and which doesn't really highlight the complexity.
Absolutely. But probably does work on the rugby field, I suspect.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's sometimes can be really wonderful, and most of the time is really wonderful. And the biggest thing is trying to keep boundaries. So, but I think it's an ongoing learning experience. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Your time in Wellington, I've noticed some press, and it's not just typical to Wellington, but the shortage of doctors coming through. I know Ian Spencer's in a media interview I saw online indicated he's stayed there, is continuing to have to work probably more than he'd like to do at this part of his career. How much of a challenge is that in Wellington, and have you noticed it's a different challenge in other towns?
Mm. Western New South Wales, I think we do struggle a little bit. We don't have a lot of, there are a lot of communities that haven't seen a stable GP for many, 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 many years, or which is still fine. They might have a fly in, fly out arrangement of somebody who's fairly regular, which, we've got to look at all different models. But yes, Dr. Spencer's 77 and still working in the clinic. And last year we lost the last of the GP, so it was just the two of him, and we were booked out, each of us, for over 2 months. And there's only two practices in Wellington, and the AMS, which is the other practice, had closed their books. So it was challenging, extremely challenging. We were working very hard and trying to fit in people, and Ian basically works from dawn till dusk and has done for a long time. So it's one, and we had multiple meetings with our PHN and our the local health district, and just trying to come up with different models for the practice. Encouraging patients to use telehealth if there were things that they could use that for. But then there's a lot of barriers in terms of cost and financial and access and internet, etc. Particularly in Wellington. So it was very challenging, and I guess challenge also breeds innovation, and I think that there's probably room that there were some things that we improved based on that challenge, but it's something that's ongoing. Particularly, I've discovered in Western New South Wales, which I can sort of name everybody who's a permanent GP here, and or in our Dubbo region, for example, and which is pretty crazy, I guess, for the size, a place the size of Wales.
How important are registrars in helping to combat that workforce shortage and coming to the bush?
Oh, invaluable. I guess I think that the problem we're having at the moment, and the problem I guess a lot of us foresee, is that we sort of missed a generation of GPs, I think, and so we're not having a lot of people coming into the supervision role and the sort of fellow GP. So we're really going to rely on a lot of very early fellows, I think, in the coming years on filling a lot of these gaps. And also, I think whilst it's sometimes touted as a negative or a challenge, is that people are looking at different ways to work, and that might be seen as, they're not staying in the communities for 30 years, but it's probably providing a bit of diversity to some of these communities in some ways, even though it's not the traditional model. So I think that having the registrars there is probably providing an understanding for communities as to how the future of healthcare may look. And that it may not necessarily be what it always had been. So I think it is very important to have that. And we've got lots of registrars coming through, which is fantastic. So we've just got to keep them here and try and get a future workforce.
Keep them on the footy team. That does bring me to a catch cry that you have been quoted as saying, and has seemed to have taken on a life of its own. Guilt is not a rural recruitment strategy. Tell me a bit about that and what it means to you.
Yeah, so I think originally I went to the AMA. I was very lucky to go to the Rural AMA Health Summit, and I was on a panel with Richard Colbrand, the CEO of RDAA, which is who I'm a big fan of, and Professor Jenny May before she was the National Rural Health Commissioner. So I felt like a very small fish on a very impressive looking panel. So I had to try and come up with some intelligent things to say from my junior perspective as a registrar. But one of the things was that I had sort of noticed was that sort of retention strategies or even recruitment strategies, for example, were could be somewhat based around, the community needs you, and you'll feel you should feel guilty if you're leaving. And I think that that's absolutely not how we should be retaining or recruiting people to rural areas. They should be supported and want to be there. And I think that sometimes it's not necessarily that the policy is that way, but it's sometimes on the ground things can happen in a different way, and levers can move that can make individual clinicians feel as though, if I leave town, there's no one else there, and who will look after them, and what will we do? I'll just have to stay on. And I think that it should be more about how we support these people rather than guilting them into staying in their communities, because a lot of practitioners obviously care greatly for their community. So yeah.
And do you think policymakers and governments really rely on that goodwill that doctors have for their communities?
I think that in general practice, or I mean, that's what's in these rural community general practice and BMOs and things. That's what they've relied on for a long, long time, a very long time, and to do still to a certain extent. And I guess that's where the comment about registrars and innovative ways to improve this comes in as well, where we just need to go back to the drawing board and see what people actually want in order to feel supported in their community, and not necessarily spoon feeding doctors, because we're allowed to do it tough as well, but there should be support for people to have job fulfillment and feel comfortable in a community and be able to go away on holidays or have a sick day and not feel guilty that they're letting down the remainder of the community.
Are there movements in that area, do you think, in some of those areas, in terms of being able to get away, better conditions, etc.?
I think the recognition is there. I think a lot of I've spoken about this before, and I think I spoke about it at that health summit. Is that often? I mean, I've found, particularly in New South Wales. Obviously, I don't have a broad range of experience except hearing things through the Rural Doctors Association. But in my LHD, for example, it somewhat feels paradoxical. At the policy level, we're encouraging all of these rural generalists to come out and young people to get into it and become general practitioners and VMOs in the hospital for these small communities. But on the ground, they're taking away equipment and not supporting decisions or not listening to ideas and things like that. And I think that there's a bit of a paradox going on in terms of what we say and what's actually happening on the ground, and definitely something we've found in Western New South Wales, unfortunately. But I think the acknowledgement is there, and obviously it's the thought that counts to start with. But I think there's still a bit of way to go to try and I think it does happen in some places, particularly here in other states. There's wonderful recognition of these things, and things are actually moving on the ground in the right way. But I would say New South Wales is a little bit behind the 8 ball on that, but we've got the acknowledgement, so we'll start with that and we'll keep moving forward.
We push on from there.
Mm.
Now, you've selected population health as your advanced skill for your RG training. Tell me a little bit about your interest in this area and what's driven it.
So originally I was going to do palliative care. I felt that palliative care was a bit of an extension of holistic care, good end-of-life dying, etc. But I left the hospital, went and worked for Dr. Spencer, and I thought there's no way in hell that I'll go back to a big hospital. So the thought of going back and doing a year of palliative care in a big hospital was off the cards. So I had a look at, I'm an ACRRRM trainee, had a look at some of the other things there, and I've always been interested in public health and obviously rural advocacy. And population health feel like a very good fit. And I started a Master's of Public Health at the same time. It wasn't necessarily a requirement, but I always wanted to do that and learn a little bit more on all of that front, and actually have some, some theory behind some of the things that we sort of sometimes come up with. But yeah, it's been really interesting, and I've really enjoyed it. I thought, God, I wish I enjoyed uni this much back in the day. I've been loving my Masters, but with the population health specialty skill, I had to do a research project, and I wanted to do one as a registrar. And in my role as a registrar liaison officer, I'd spoken a lot to people about their visions of the future of who was going to own all the practices, because I didn't know many people who were planning on buying a practice, and it definitely wasn't a thing that was talked about much. And so I wanted to do a project on what the models were going to be in the future for practice owning and what general practice would look like. So I did it in consultation with Dr. Shannon Knott, who also great inspiration, on the 4Ts model, which is something we have in Western New South Wales, whereby our LHD actually employs the fellows. So it's a single employer model for fellows, essentially. So, which is something we don't have in New South Wales. And I wanted to see what the community felt about these, and how whether there were actually socio-economic benefits from having the the general practice and secondary care set up this way. Obviously there was they're looking into benefits of how the staff felt about it, which I also looked at, but also, were there things where more people staying in town? Were they using local shops? Was it boosting the economy of these small towns that are only between 500 and 1,000 people? So it was a very interesting project with CSU. I did it and had my supervisors through there, learned a lot about research, which was good. And yeah, so I think it's helped me a lot to understand a little bit more about A, the research project, B, these wonderful little towns that I had some great coffees with people and cake, and yeah, hoping to publish that later this year.
How does that model demonstrated in rural towns? How does it actually work?
So the way they have it, the 4Ts, because they're all very small communities that couldn't ever sustain a private general practice. So you could not have a private business there. You would not make enough money to run it. So the local health district stepped in to provide general practice services out of the MPS or the little local hospital, but the fellows that they employed were also employed in the emergency department as well, so they also did a bit of on-call and emergency work and ward work, and I guess it was, I mean, a lot of the community obviously said, we just want a service, we don't really care who runs it, but the benefit of it was that it did keep general practitioners coming to those communities. And also, again, as I've said, it's a different model of how people want to work. Some of the practitioners would go to one town for a couple of days, another day somewhere else, and sort of rotate between the 4 communities that started with T. So it allowed people to fly in, fly out, or drive in, drive out, as well as work in several communities that needed service. And yeah, it was definitely an interesting model. And will it be scalable? Yeah, time will tell, I guess.
Interesting. And it takes junior doctors, new doctors, away from having to invest in the practices to be able to work in them and being attached to them then and attached to those towns.
Absolutely. I think it's also teaching the local health district how hard it is to run a general practice and how much of a loss most of them run. So yes. I think they're finding some very interesting things about Medicare.
That's interesting. Could be very telling.
I don't
know. Did the COVID years sort of shape your interest in population health as well? Was that an impact?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just generally being in Western, so I did my junior medical officer years in Dubbo, and I was there in the height of COVID for my internship and residency. It was a pretty good start to working, but and in Dubbo we had pretty good going lockdown for a long time, and we were really worried about a lot of our sort of more rural, remote communities, like particularly places with high Indigenous populations and things, and places that Dubbo looked after. So I think, and watching, I guess, the leaders of our hospital and how they managed that, what were we going to do with the overrun of COVID patients, and how did they manage, interestingly, the people around town who were walking around most of the time, and yeah, so it was definitely an interesting time, and 100% shaped my interest in how we manage, I guess, disaster, but also, what are the future prospects for these kinds of things happening again.
As a junior doctor, you've had and you continue to have a strong involvement in numerous organisations, including being the Doctor in Training representative on the Rural Doctors Association of New South Wales from 2021 to 2023. You've undertaken multiple roles with ACRRRM and most recently joined the board of the Rural Doctors Foundation. You're a very busy person. In the case of the Rural Doctors Association of New South Wales in particular, what did your involvement with that organisation teach you about advocacy on rural health, how to achieve the best outcomes for the rural health sector and for rural patients from politicians and bureaucrats? Because it's an area that can seem like a very hard slog sometimes.
Absolutely. And being in New South Wales, as we've already touched on, we love hitting our head against a brick wall. No, it's been a wonderful. I can't even really express the what I learned from the RDA. I think as clinicians, a lot of us go through our medical lives with our head in the sand, almost as to how policy works or how the districts work, etc. And I think that was learning about sort of the ministry and how to put together a policy response. And I was really lucky when I was on the committee. We was the time when they did the big inquest into rural services in New South Wales. So I was able to contribute to that as well as an individual, but also as a part of the RDA. And I think that in preparing those things and looking at evidence and sort of advocating on things that I did know about or I was involved in was a great privilege for a start, but also I think hearing stories from across New South Wales and helping individual clinicians and some of the issues that were going on was it's really shaped the way I try to approach things as well. Particularly, I think as a cohort general practice, I think we sometimes always feel like we're a bit hard done by, but at times. So, and I think that it taught me to not just be the angry person at the end of the document or the end of the phone. There's times definitely that's useful, but I think it was also trying to look at ways to work with governments and management and things like that to improve outcomes and try and come up with gaps or perspectives that they may not have considered and proposing things that were in their language, so to speak, which is very different to clinicians' language. And I think that was one of the big things I definitely learned. I also obviously got a lot of wonderful mentors out of the committee, of course, and continue to email them annoyingly or message them or talk to them as much as possible. I love catching up with everybody at the conferences, etc. So, and yeah, I think that was probably the biggest benefits I got out of being on that committee.
What languages do politicians speak? What messages do they hear the clearest, do you think, in your experience?
It's interesting. I think they love a good number crunch, which isn't always, it's really unhelpful in rural medicine sometimes because our numbers aren't as big as other numbers, but it doesn't mean that Joe Bloggs out here in Coona is different to Joe Bloggs in Sydney, who also, both need the same treatment, but because he's one of three and Joe Bloggs in the city is one of 3,000, we don't quite get off the ground as much with those number crunching. So we do have to use a bit of, the human aspect, which doesn't always go down well with bureaucrats and politicians. So it's definitely challenging, I think, from that perspective because of that numbers game and how do we make people understand that the investment it should be equal and even, tricky, very tricky. I think that's the biggest language they speak.
You did have one big win on the management committee at RDAA New South Wales when you were driving successful advocacy. I always struggle with that word, for pay parity for rurally based JMOs. Tell me what the situation was before you and your RDAA New South Wales colleagues undertook that lobbying and what it achieved.
Yeah, so in New South Wales, I think a lot of the rural hospitals back in the day when the award was sort of thought up, put together for junior medical officers, a lot of the smaller hospitals were run by fly-in, fly-out junior medical officers. So it's not that way anymore. So I was based in Dubbo. I wanted to go to Dubbo. I interviewed in Dubbo. I have my house there, my family there. And I wasn't... So then we had people who came out from Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney who were seconded out to Dubbo, and they would come out seconded and they would get flights out to Dubbo, they would get accommodation, they would get paid up a grade, and which we didn't necessarily get if we went to Sydney. So if I was to go and do a rotation in Sydney, I wouldn't get any of that stuff. I'd have to find my own 10-week accommodation. I would get paid the same as I was. And I guess it felt like a very big injustice, particularly, for example, when I was a PGY3, I was doing a night shifts in charge of the Dubbo ED. We draw from the size of Wales. So, and the resident that was on with me was a rotating person from Sydney and obviously a great human being and definitely nothing against them, but they were getting paid the same amount as me as I was to run the department. So, and so I think that, I guess that injustice was something that had been seen for a long while in our ward, and had been flagged by multiple members of the RDA prior to myself. So people like Marion Dover, for example, another great inspiration of mine. But and also previous doctors in training on the committee with me as well. So definitely not just myself and the whole committee behind it. And I think once they did the inquest into sort of rural services, it was one of the recommendations, or it was one of the things that they wanted to look into. So we did a lot more sort of advocacy around that. And I think on the select, I think it's called the select committee, they also had a few advocates on there. I think there was a psychiatrist from Dubbo who also understood that those things that were going on, and we were able to get it changed so that if I did rotate to Sydney, that I could get accommodation, and it would be mandatory for me to also be paid up a grade because I was on secondment, just like they were on secondment, and that I would have accommodation as well. So that's, I guess it was trying to get that equality, that to suggest that just because my home-based hospital is an RPA, that I should still have the benefits of secondment, I guess.
Absolutely. And do you think it's opened up other areas for similar disparities to be remedied?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I think the rural areas are becoming, those hospitals, that their merits are increasing, or the understanding of their merits is definitely increasing, just around culture, which is also always wonderful. But I think it definitely can open up other things, and it's not just the junior medical officers, it's the next, when you get into registrar stage of the various trainings. A lot of the problem we have with non-GP specialists is that they will have to rotate back to a metropolitan hospital. They can't have a home base in a rural hospital. They have to start in Sydney and go elsewhere, which it really should be around the other way if they want to work rurally and go on secondment to the city hospitals and get some extra experience and come back to where they get a more general experience anyway. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we've got to work on, but I think it definitely opens up the dialogue again around, well, we're out here and we're doing just as good a job as those who are being rotated out. If not, sometimes, we know more because we're doing more.
Absolutely. And it shows that progress can be made too.
Mm.
So I mentioned earlier, outside medicine, you've got a fairly significant sporting passion, rugby union. It's seen you play at representative level across New South Wales. What do you enjoy about rugby union, and does the doctor in you ever make you think, I really shouldn't be playing this?
Interestingly, I don't think I've ever thought that.
I've put it into your mind now.
Which just goes to show how much I love rugby union.
Well, next time I talk to you, you'll be doing lawn bowls thanks to me.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll take a lot to take the fight out of me. Yes, it is a very significant passion. It mirrors probably my time in medicine as well. I think it's very similar. Interestingly, I think a game of country rugby union is very similar to us all in rural medicine. We're all of different shapes and sizes. We all have different skills, and we're all sort of fighting for the same thing. And
yes, but you don't tackle each other.
Yeah, well, you don't know that.
Sometimes.
Sometimes we're tackling with words. We're tackling with policy. Sometimes we want to tackle politicians, or bureaucrats.
Yeah. Yes.
No, and I've met so many amazing people through rugby, and I think being a female. So when I first started playing rugby, I started playing in Sydney, where I lived when I was at university, and it was still called chugby, and there was still a bit of stigma around it, I think. And then in the following year was the Rio Olympics, and we had the girls win the sevens. And since then, like in my 10 years of playing rugby, it's just exploded, and it's been so wonderful because I think that it certainly takes a certain person to play, a certain girl to play rugby union, and sort of you kind of end up with 15 instant friends because you're all there together having a great time. And some of the people that I played with over the years, just come from some of the most amazing places, and rugby saved their lives. And yeah, I think it's a fantastic sport, and particularly for women. This is the doctor part of me, Patrick. Particularly for women who typically, from 20 years old onwards, are winding down in sport, are finding, there's always body image issues, etc. And to have people think they feel strong and powerful at any speed or any size is just such a great benefit. And the health benefits are just beyond the head knocks and broken arms.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Jean, we're just about to run out of time. It's been wonderful speaking with you today. Congratulations again on your award, and thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Patrick. It's been such a wonderful privilege. And I guess I just wanted to say a final thank you to all my friends, family, colleagues, and in particular my partner Jay, who puts up with me through thick and thin and all of my overcommitting. And my friend Justine out at Coonabarabran, also a bunch of people just doing wonderful work that have got me to where I am today. So thank you again. And I'm stoked to be a part of all of this.
And that was Dr. Jean Littlewood, RDAA's Rural Doctor in Training of the Year for 2025. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and I look forward to having you tune in again. Until next time, happy days.